of an island. And Japan's...
should somehow break a crown, he was able to take this to your local friendly dentist.
I love pop memorabilia. I've got Elvis Presley's appendix under the desk if anyone's interested. Also on Friday, Star Trek celebrates 25 years by boldly going back to where they've been before. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy relive their greatest adventures. Beam me back, Scotty.
Roddenberry created an unprecedented mix of culture and race working alongside each other in the future. Thankfully, the network saw something exciting and unique. As a result, NBC decided to go where no man has gone before and premiered their first historic episode on September 8th, 1966.
Set your phaser on 1/4. I'll leave mine on stun. Let's get him.
They explain what a Klingon is along the way, by the way. A Klingon is, of course, a crimpling space sweater, so figure-hugging that towards the end of the series, Captain Kirk was beginning to look like the Lana Turner of the 24th century. From the ridiculous to the sublime, Inspector Morse is back tomorrow. This series, we're promised, will be told why Morse refuses to reveal his first name. All we know is that it starts with E, so who knows, maybe it's E48678 Morse. Tonight's episode, though, sheds more light than before on the Inspector's past, as we meet his ex-fiancée, the love of his life. Soon, her brother is matchmaking and asking them to lunch, or as he puts it, why don't I look out an extra pair of nose bags? Nose bags? Surely that's Inspector Horse.
I've lost a great deal here.
So have I. This is madness! Madness! My father-in-law killed himself. Everybody knows that.
We're at the inquest.
I was curious.
You have to help me.
Things may not have been as straightforward as they seem. It's possible that Henry did not take his own life.
Love the way he talks so slowly. Things may not be as straightforward as they seem. That's Inspector Morse, a strong start to the new series. Tomorrow at 8 on ITV. Don't forget Tina Turner, the girl from Nutbush. BBC One tonight, 10:50. Friday night on BBC Two, Star Trek's 25th anniversary special at 7:10, and Arena at 9 o'clock. Joanne.
That's how they've managed to keep the series going so long. Just talk slowly.
It's 2 hours.
Finally, the United States Post Office has unveiled 2 designs for commemorative Elvis stamps due to be launched in May. Consumers are being invited to choose which one will finally be issued. The 50s Elvis, all greased hair, moody and magnificent, or Elvis in the sequined Las Vegas 70s. I suppose they could always have a cast of his dentures. Perhaps the British Post Office should copy the gimmick, because the way you vote is by, what else? Sending a postcard, of course. That's all from us. Now over to Simon for the news. Not the news, the sport.
That's it. I'm the sport.
Well.
You're the arts. Morning. New Zealand's cricketers have followed up their surprise World Cup defeat of Australia with victory over Sri Lanka. In Hamilton this morning, man of the match Ken Rutherford top scored with 65, as New Zealand has made it home with 10 balls to spare. It was Rutherford's third half century in 4 innings since being recalled to the team. Other World Cup news. England batsman Alan Lamb has ruled himself out of England's second World Cup match against the West Indies in Melbourne. Lamb is nursing a calf injury. But the West Indies opener Brian Lara is expected to be fit for the game on Thursday. Lara retired hurt with a bruised foot during the West Indies' 10-wicket victory over Pakistan. Boxing, and as the world heavyweight division contemplates a future without Mike Tyson, news this morning that former champion Larry Holmes is set for another title shot at the age of 43.
Holmes returned to the ring last year after a 3-year retirement. Seen here beating Art Card in September, he confirmed he was still a force to be reckoned with earlier this month, with a victory over the highly rated and previously undefeated Ray Mercer. Holmes is now expected to fight reigning world champion Evander Holyfield in Las Vegas on June the 5th and has been offered $4 million for the bout. Holyfield's fee is rumoured to be nearly 3 times that amount, $11 million. Here, meanwhile, WBO super middleweight champion Chris Eubank announced yesterday that he'll defend his title against the Paraguayan Juan Carlos Jimenez in Manchester this April. But less than 6 months after the bout that left Michael Watson in a coma, Eubank is facing a police inquiry following a car accident which killed a construction worker. And he says that his boxing success is now of little significance.
All these achievements, sure, they've been good, but because one man has lost his life and another has been maimed, there's no novelty for me The achievements, if anything, flat. They mean nothing anymore to me. There was a price to pay, inevitably, in such a sport, be it irreparable damage, be it misfortune. This is the price I'm paying.
A chastening tale. Liverpool striker Ian Rush finds out later today whether he'll need a third operation this season on his injured knee. Rush, who's made just 2 first-team starts since November, broke down in training yesterday as Liverpool prepared for tomorrow's FA Cup 5th round replay against Ipswich. But better news for John Barnes. He could be back in the Liverpool side for next week's UEFA Cup quarter-final first leg in Genoa. Barnes has completed just 3 games this season because of injury. And Sheffield Wednesday striker David Hirst is being chased by the Italian First Division side Torino. He's valued at £3 million and is wanted as a replacement for Torino's Brazilian international Walter Casagrande. Tennis. John McEnroe and Andre Agassi have been left out of the International Federation's list of entrants for the Barcelona Olympics. Neither player was nominated by US tennis officials. And Steffi Graf will be an overwhelming favourite in the women's event. Monica Seles, Martina Navratilova and Gabriela Sabatini failed to qualify after missing last year's Federation Cup. Elsewhere, in squash, top seed Jansher Khan beat world number 3 Chris Dittmar in 4 games to retain his Welsh Classic title in Cardiff. Favourites Harlequins and Bath have been drawn apart in the semi-finals of Rugby Union's Pilkington Cup. The holders Quins play Leicester, while Bath travel to West Country rivals Gloucester, their 7th away draw in 7 semi-final appearances. And finally, international athletes are being advised against travelling with large sums of money following the theft of £17,000 belonging to the Russian hurdler Lyudmila Narozilenko from a hotel room in Birmingham last weekend. The world 100 metres champion had earned the money on the European circuit last season. She decided to keep it with her because she felt it was safer than leaving it in a Russian bank. Perhaps she was wrong. That's the sport. Now, just before the news with Dermot, here's Greg with the weather. Greg.
Thanks, Simon, and take care if you're driving this morning, particularly in the south, as there's an awful lot of fog about. Patchy fog is affecting a wide area of southern England this morning, with some rather grey and misty conditions extending up across the Midlands as well. Visibility is very poor in places, especially in Kent and Essex. In the north, showers are dying out in the far northwest, while there's a little rain across Northern Ireland and the borders. Scotland is going to be mostly cloudy today, with outbreaks of rain spreading northwards and a few showers at first in the Highlands and Islands. There's thick fog across the central region at the moment and high winds with speed restrictions at the Forth Road Bridge. For Northern Ireland, there'll be some rain or drizzle too and strong winds by the afternoon. Much of northern England will have a misty, dull start, but it should become brighter with some sunshine developing from the south. Here, an accident has blocked part of the M6 in Lancashire. That's northbound at junction 33, the turn-off for Lancaster South. Wales and the West Country will have a warmish day with plenty of brightness once the fog goes. An accident on the A36 between Warminster and Bath, blocking the road at Limpley Stoke, should soon be cleared. The southeast can expect a dry day with sunny spells later on and temperatures on the mild side for late February. By this evening, there'll be just a little rain left in the far northwest of Scotland, with the rest of the country dry and having broken cloud. Tomorrow, another band of rain will push across Scotland and into northwest England, with some drizzle turning up in the far southwest as well, but it's going to be mainly dry and bright in the south and east of the country. Finally, on the trains, services between Faversham and Ramsgate are being delayed by track repairs, and signalling problems are causing delays on the northern line of the London Underground. And that's it. Coming next, the news with Dermot.
Good morning, you're watching the Channel 4 Daily on Tuesday the 25th of February. The news from around the world.
America's Jewish lobby accuses the Bush administration of siding with the Palestinians after James Baker gives Israel a choice: loan guarantees or settlements.
Nationalists in Northern Ireland say they're hopeful of progress at this week's Downing Street summit. Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds and John Major want to see inter-party talks restarted.
A former Japanese Prime Minister testifies about bribery. Zenko Suzuki is forced by the opposition to come to Parliament and take the stand.
The US Secretary of State's decision to publicly give the Israeli government an ultimatum over settlements is being seen here as America siding with the Palestinians as the new round of peace talks begins. The gloves are now off as the Bush administration came firmly off the fence to push the Israeli government into a corner. With precise timing, Secretary of State James Baker was giving evidence to the powerful House Committee on Foreign Aid. It was the perfect platform on the day peace talks resumed to tell the Shamir government it had a choice: to receive $10 billion in American aid guarantees or to settle the occupied territories, but not both.
That the United States is ready, at least this administration is ready to support loan guarantees, absorption assistance to Israel of up to $2 billion per year for 5 years, provided, though, there is a halt or an end to settlement activity. The choice, Mr. Chairman, from our standpoint is Israel's. The choice is Israel's.
It was not what Israel's firmest supporters in Congress wanted to hear.
Why must you insist on a loan guarantee that is coupled with a freeze of settlements when you, in fact, are not putting any conditions on anyone else on the Arab side at all?
Nobody else is asking us for $10 billion in additional assistance over and above the $3 to $4 billion that we give every year with no strings attached.
It's a measure of the administration's confidence in its policy against the settlements that Baker was clearly briefed to take the hard line, George Bush's pit bull.
Well, sir, you did not finish the answer, and it's
finished
basically the same way you want to deal with this
I
subject.
finished it as far as I was concerned, and I will determine when I finish my answers, not you.
A few miles away in downtown Washington, the exchange was the talk of the peace conference. The Arab and Palestinian delegation interpreting it as America coming off the fence to side with them.
Continued establishment of settlements in the occupied territories is in absolute contradiction with the objective of establishing a just and stable peace in the area.
The Israelis attempting to play the issue down.
In reality, it's perfectly legal. It is something which should be perceived as a way of peaceful coexistence, not in any other way.
The fallout from yesterday will certainly play a major part in the development of this round of talks over the next few days.
400,000 Jews have come to Israel from the former Soviet Union since 1989. Over 50% are still unemployed, many relying on soup kitchens and handouts for survival. Hundreds of thousands more Russian Jews are expected to come. If there are no loan guarantees, it could be a nightmare, though Israeli ministers still try to sound optimistic.
It's horrible, it's full of pain, it's disastrous, but you continue to live as a people and as a nation.
Many of the immigrants are housed in bleak caravan sites such as this one, Beit Hashmonai, just outside Tel Aviv. Among them are some of the most skilled members of Russian society, engineers, doctors and scientists. Few have found jobs matching their skills. They know how useful the loan guarantees would be, though they're preparing to go it alone if they have to.
We have problem with language, and we have problem with culture, and we have many problems.
As I do feel, so the people can survive without it, working for themselves and trying to do their best in the fields they're trying to find for themselves.
Now, angered by what they see as government mishandling of their cause, some Soviet-born Jews are preparing to enter politics. It's another potential problem for the Israeli establishment. They've set up a party called DA. Israel's complex election laws mean it could well win a couple of seats and hold the balance of power after June's general election.
Immigrants are not the part of that status quo. That's their problem. That's why they're suffering. They're not already in, but that also gives them a chance to change whatever is not perfect, and so many things are not perfect in the society, in the economy. That's why we think that though so many parties are already in, they are all objectory parties of status quo. We are going to be a party of change.
The planes are still arriving from Russia and the other former Soviet republics. In public, though, the Israeli government remains defiant over the issue of loan guarantees and the freezing of West Bank settlements. But with the total cost of integrating the new immigrants estimated at $50 billion, the pressure for a deal with Washington is enormous. And now the new arrivals are showing that they want a say in their future too. John Schofield, ITN, Tel Aviv.
Well, I'm joined now by Bassem Abu Sharif, the PLO leader, Yasser Arafat's political advisor. Now, Bassem Abu Sharif, from the PLO's point of view, what effect will Mr. Baker's statement have on the Middle East peace talks?
Well, we've always said that Mr. Baker is a very serious man, and President Bush are serious about peace establishment in the Middle East. But we've always requested practical steps to be made, because the Middle East cannot cope up with a status quo.
But is this
that
statement
will never allow a vacuum?
Is this statement from
Yesterday,
Mr. Baker not a practical step, though, in moving the peace process forward?
Well, I think it is in a way, but the fact that he had allowed continuation of construction of houses that the Israelis had already started to build on our occupied territory is in fact a breach of international law. Constructing a colony on the occupied territories is constructing a colony, whether continuing it or not. And this is in fact a contradiction with the American position itself.
Well, it's not even clear that things will go that far, that the Israelis will stop in any way, shape or form. How would you interpret it if the Israelis refused to stop construction altogether?
The Israelis had already confiscated large pieces of land, and they have thrown in cement bags, and considered that this is a colony under construction.
So is there any room for compromise in the PLO's position? You stand by your bottom line of complete withdrawal from the occupied territories as a precondition for peace.
We've been all the way considering that a compromise could be reached had the Israeli government considered that what President Bush had said is a commitment, the application of 242 and 338. Let Shamir consider the application of these resolutions, i.e. withdrawing from the occupied territories, and the compromise will be there. Shamir insisted yesterday that no land will be given back to the Arab. And I think this is the main problem. The crux is that the Israelis have to withdraw from the occupied Arab territory.
Bassem Abu Sharif, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Here, the controversial Prevention of Terrorism Act has been renewed for another year after a Commons debate. Labour called for a committee to review the operation of the legislation, which gives special powers of detention, arrest and examination. Well, Northern Ireland will dominate the agenda of tomorrow's Downing Street summit between John Major and the new Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds. They'll discuss the impasse in inter-party talks.
Security forces mount a big operation overlooking North Belfast after a blast bomb attack on a patrol. No one seriously hurt, a soldier's treated for shock. For more than 22 years it's become, if not routine, then a disturbingly common occurrence. But in recent months, perhaps surprisingly, it's not been the security forces who've borne the brunt of the violence, but ordinary civilians, Protestant and Catholic, in often nakedly sectarian attacks. Joyce McCartan's son was killed by loyalists in an earlier wave of murders 5 years ago. She says the recent atrocities have united the two communities in a plea for peace.
Well, I think there's a change on the way. I just can't put my finger on it, but people are angry at what's happening. And they would love to see the people in power sitting down round the table and come to some agreement for to try and stop all this killing and unnecessary heartache for people here.
But if in the back streets of Belfast that have seen the worst of the violence, there's a yearning for peace, will that translate itself into political dialogue?
It's highly unlikely that there's going to be a dramatic change of heart in the coming weeks and months, despite the involvement directly of the British Prime Minister, Mr. Major. I don't see that change of heart. Dublin is essentially a foreign country to the Unionist opinion, leadership-wise and here on the ground. And similarly, the SDLP are desperate to try and breathe new life into the Anglo-Irish Agreement, which is anathema to Unionists. So you're still trying to square a political circle.
Certainly the political slogans haven't changed, but many here believe the views of ordinary people are not as hardline as their politicians. Now a group called Initiative 92 is attempting to get ordinary people, individuals, community groups, to submit their views to a year-long forum to find out what Ulster people really want.
We're not trying to compete with the politicians, but we're suggesting that those people might feed into the political process if they have a chance to voice their views on the big questions of the Constitution, also the other questions of social and economic justice here, and security forces and the way in which civil liberties are at stake.
Many people concerned about yet another generation growing up in an environment of violence are already taking action. A growing number of integrated schools are proving the prejudices of the past can be overturned. Protestant and Catholic children are educated here, showing the two communities can have a future together. But cross-community initiatives which build bridges are one thing, actually ending the present level of violence is quite another. And few people in Northern Ireland believe the meeting between Mr. Major and Mr. Reynolds will achieve that one thing that most people want, an end to the killings. John Draper, ITN, Belfast.
Now the main news this morning. James Baker's ultimatum to Israel on settlements draws fire from Washington's Jewish lobby. Hopes rise for this week's summit between John Major and Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds. And coming up, dolphins pay with their lives to warn America of coastal pollution.
Japan's former Prime Minister, Zenko Suzuki, has testified to Parliament over bribery allegations. Before he did so, a former state minister said on oath that he'd taken £92,000 in return for political favours. The opposition is relishing all this, the government's squirming in embarrassment as the private backhanders become public headlines. The opposition had waited weeks for this, former Prime Minister Zenko Suzuki coming to Parliament to confess. Or maybe not. He was not under oath and could lie with impunity, or at least, like Ronald Reagan during the Irangate hearings, say he'd forgotten. In the event, he chose denial. He said he'd never received money from the Kiowa steel firm in connection with an exclusive country club the firm was planning to build.
I have never received any compensation money of political funding from Kiowa, regardless of rumours in the mass media.
Despite Suzuki's denial, it's believed he's told investigators he received about £40,000 from the Kiowa steel firm in return for political favours, but he says he returned the money. Other sources allege he received up to £740,000. The Budget Committee unanimously called Suzuki to testify. For 2 weeks, its attempts to formulate Japan's budget were stalled as the opposition demanded his appearance. All in all, a remarkable day for the washing of filthy political linen in public. And all this when the present Prime Minister, Kiichi Miyazawa, is attempting to draft laws that might help tackle the give and take of financial gifts, so much a part of Japanese political culture.
The world's largest car maker, General Motors, says it lost more money last year than any corporation in history, $4.5 billion. The motor giant is now preparing to close the first of 21 factories, which will eventually mean 74,000 more jobless Americans. The shock of those first job cuts are just hitting home. General Motors workers have known for months that the axe was swinging, but only 2 plants making the same cars knew they were in competition for execution. The factory at Arlington in Texas won the decision to stay open. Willow Run at Ypsilanti, Michigan is to go. Jessie Hall was totally unprepared for the announcement she heard on television.
The Willow Run plant will be closed down.
Laid off by GM last year, Jessie now knows she can never go back.
I just didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't want it to happen to anybody. Just can't believe it.
Her husband Bob still works at the plant. He too was stunned.
A lot of people in this plant have worked a lot of long, hard years for General Motors to be discarded so easily.
There's added bitterness in the belief that the closure decision was prompted by the availability of cheaper foreign labor.
We have no future. So what are we going to do now? We're going to Mexico. Here they say buy American. That ain't sure as hell ain't American in my book.
The Willow Run closure will mean the direct loss of 3,000 jobs. But industry analysts estimate that it means up to 10,000 more jobs will have to go in allied industries.
The level of debt in Britain has reached new heights, with 2.5 million households now facing difficulties. A report to be published this week is expected to show a 5-fold increase in average personal debt over the last 3 years.
3 years ago, Mike and Jill Robinson were both in work, just about to buy their first home and looking forward to the birth of baby Lara. Now they're both unemployed and £30,000 in debt, with bank loans, hire purchase arrears and catalogue debts. Tomorrow a county court will decide whether their home should be repossessed.
I think it's much too easy, and it's also all these things like all the adverts and telly make you feel as though to be on a certain level you've got to have things. You've got to have a nice car, and you've got to have nice furniture, and you've got to live a certain lifestyle. And so we fell into that trap of thinking that we had to have these material things.
The stress of their financial problems has put their marriage at risk and affected their health.
It led me to actually leaving Jill. I actually moved to Peckham for a number of months. I also have been told I've got an ulcer, which is due to stress. It's stress related. And now I've come back and we're hopefully going to make it. We've been together 9 years, but we've found that this has been the toughest battle so far. There's all the money worries and the debts that we've accumulated.
Money advice centres are reporting massive increases in the number of inquiries over debt problems, particularly multiple debts, with some people having 30 or more creditors. This centre near Bromley in Kent dealt with people owing an average £5,000 3 years ago. Now the average is £25,000.
Some people are suicidal when they come to see us. That's a very common thing. I'm going to throw myself off a beachy hedge, people say. A lot of people are worried that things are going to happen to them which can't. Like, a lot of people are worried their children are going to be taken away from them when obviously they can't. They're worried about bailiffs knocking at the door, things like that. So we try and reassure them where we can.
The country's biggest counselling service, the National Association of Citizens Advice Bureau, says it's stretched to crisis point, with 500,000 requests a year for help with repaying debts. The organisation believes credit companies should take more responsibility. The Robinsons are hoping they'll climb out of the debt trap. Mike plans to train as a music teacher, Jill a drama teacher. But like hundreds of thousands of other debtors, their future's highly uncertain. Denise O'Callaghan, ITN, South London.
The Chinese government has sharply rebuked the West for what it calls meddling in the affairs of Tibet. It says Tibet is an integral part of China and not a colony, let alone a separate country. The announcement comes as China begins a propaganda offensive against Tibetan nationalism. There's increased security in Lhasa, the Tibetan capital. 3 years ago, there was serious rioting here as Tibetans protested against Chinese rule. Western tourists have been ordered out of the region. Tibetan exiles in India are keeping up the pressure as the anniversary of the riots approaches. The Chinese flag was burned during this recent protest in New Delhi. The Tibetan clampdown comes as Beijing's communist press issues editorials calling for economic reforms and liberalism and the promotion of some capitalist ideas. Deng Xiaoping's name was quoted as the architect of reforms whose ideas must now be continued.
Evidence is emerging of a new threat to marine mammals living in American coastal waters. Congress is expected to increase funding to investigate the problem, which some researchers believe could pose an eventual threat to humans. Every week, biologist Jay Gorzaleni searches the waters around Sarasota, Florida, for bottlenose dolphins. They still jump and play, but he's disturbed by the numbers of sick and dying. Now it's been established that some of them have symptoms of anthracosis, coal miners' black lung disease.
It was very surprising. Having marine mammals be affected by air was sort of the last thing you would expect to have happen, all the other problems that they have.
Researchers now say the air dolphins breathe is the most polluted of all, filled with heavy black carbon that settles close to the water surface. While the concentrations were not enough alone to kill the animals, scientists believe that black lung disease among dolphins sends an urgent message.
That marine mammals are the canaries of the ocean. They're telling us that we should be concerned about the health of the marine ecosystem, and we have to do so now before it's too late.
There are other ominous signs. Worldwide, thousands of dolphins and other marine mammals have mysteriously died over the past 10 years. Marine scientists acknowledge there's no conclusive proof that pollution is killing dolphins, and critics believe the claims are exaggerated.
Animals have always died in the past. Animals will always die in the future. All kinds of strange natural events occur. You cannot conclude from a particular event anything about a given trend. My guess is the oceans are cleaner than they were 50 years ago.
In spite of the debate, most experts agree we should care about the dolphins' health because what happens to them might just happen to us.
We've got some news just in. 6 people have been taken to hospital after a train was derailed in Essex. No one was seriously hurt. It happened this morning at Rayleigh. 3 coaches were derailed and the station is expected to be blocked for most of the day. Now it's 8:21 and after the break, Business Daily has a full market report including results from the NatWest Bank.
Nice things don't ever give me trash, dear. Give me a soap that won't go in a flash, dear. This one I hope lasts longer than your cash, dear. Things have never been worse. Inside you'll miss this lather, but don't mope, dear. Somehow I know the kids and I will cope, dear. We'll hide a file inside this cake of soap, dear. Things have never been worse. At least there's one thing that I'm sure of, a luxury in our strife, imperial leather. Our only comfort in life.
Pampers know that your baby's development goes through 4 phases. That's why they design nappies that develop with him. New Pampers Phases. Phase 1 is newborn. It leaves tummy buttons uncovered to heal with this special cut-out notch. Phase 2 is baby. A liquid diet means messy leaks, so Pampers Baby has special inner leak guards to help contain the mess. Phase 3 is mobile. He never stays still, so to make his nappy stay put, Pampers Mobile introduces wider tapes. Phase 4, Junior. Wobbling moves to toddling. Pampers Junior is extra absorbent but extra narrow here to help Junior toddle without a waddle. Newborn to early feeding, wobbling to toddling. New Pampers Phases. For dryness that amazes through all your baby's phases.
Just look at all that ground-in grime.
I can't see anything shifting that.
Don't tell me. These stubborn stains are impossible.
Sorry, love.
This grease, it hasn't budged. It just never gets deep down clean, does it?
Typical. They've never heard of Shell Advanced Petrol.
Yeah, it's got special detergents that actually clean your engine while you're driving.
Exactly. And if you use it regular, it can improve your car's performance.
You think they'd know that?
Of course you would.
Right, see you next week, lads.
Do you know where this goes?
Shell Advanced Petrol cleans your engine as you drive.
Why won't my powder get this chip grease completely out at 40 degrees?
Because it's fat.
And butter? At 40 degrees, my powder won't always shift it. How come?
Because it's fat, and ordinary compacts don't stand a chance at 40 degrees.
And now?
Now there's new Ariel Ultra with fat digester. It's a remarkable new ingredient. Look, on these fat stains at 40 degrees, ordinary compacts can have problems. But new Ariel digests fat, leaving clothes ultra clean.
I hate to admit it, but Ariel's worked. The fat had no chance, even at 40 degrees.
New Ariel Ultra digests the fatty food stains ordinary compacts leave behind at 40 degrees.
I wonder what melts in a milk chocolate mouth.
Only Smarties have the answer.
Hello again. Now it's over to Greg and Mickey for the business news.
Thank you, Dermot. And there's a string of company announcements to look at this morning. First, though, the markets. And in Tokyo, the Nikkei was subdued on political worries. It closed just over 50 points higher. Here in London, the stock market looks slightly firmer. The FTSE 100 index is up 3.8, 2563.5. The pound's up by 0.4% against the dollar at 175.15. Against the German mark, though, it's down by almost a third of a pfennig at 288.12. Within the last hour, National Westminster has announced its annual results. Profits were poor, but NatWest shares rose sharply as the figure was better than expectations and the dividend was maintained at 17.5 pence. But earnings per share were down as the bank battled with a huge bad debt provision. Full-year pre-tax profits were just £110 million. That's a fall of 78%, and the prospects for this year remain unclear.
NatWest is the clearing bank most exposed to the small business sector, and that's had fateful consequences over the past year. Provisions against bad debts have risen from just over £1 billion in 1991 to over £1.8 billion this time round, and NatWest says the recession is chiefly responsible. Elsewhere, the bank's financial services division fell into a small loss, while NatWest's international division, chiefly its US operation, continued to make heavy losses. But the bank's operating profits, that is profits before provisions, were up 20% to a record £2 billion. NatWest has tried to cut costs to boost its performance and has reduced staff by about 6%. The chairman, Lord Alexander, admits unsurprisingly that 1991 has been difficult, and he points out that any recovery this year is linked to a pickup in the overall economy, both here and in the States. But like so many companies, the bank is convinced it's well positioned for the upturn.
Full-year results from the consumer products group Unilever have come in just below expectations. Profits for the full year reached £1.79 billion, a tiny increase of just 0.5% on last time. Despite that slim increase, Unilever still called 1991 a year of progress. The company says it strengthened its margins and continued with cost reductions and product innovation on its detergent and consumer foods businesses. And ECC, formerly known as English China Clays, has unveiled the terms of a rights issue. The shares are being offered on the basis of 6 new shares for every 25 currently held. The price of the issue is 415p a share, and it should raise just under £210 million. The money raised will be used to pay off American shares that were issued at the end of 1990 to fund the purchase of Georgia Kaolin. So, to help us make sense, I hope, of this string of announcements, I'm joined by our market reporter, Mickey Clark. Mickey, first of all, NatWest, why have we seen this sharp rise in the share price?
You're optimistic, aren't you? Well, several reasons. The first one is that, Greg, they've asked for their money back, but they've said please. Secondly, the figure that most people have missed this morning is the operating profit, which is up about 20% at just over £2 billion. Once you've stripped out 1.87 billion of provisions for bad debts, obviously it doesn't look so good, but the business itself is ticking over quite nicely. I think that's what's impressed the market. You know, once the provisions come to the end or the recession comes to the end, then they're fairly well geared to pick up. Income rose about 11% and cost just 7%, so there is a strong performance there, but obviously the provisions have made a large dent somewhat in it, and that's what's pushed the share price up. Obviously a maintained dividend has helped.
Right, Unilever, a bit disappointing perhaps?
Yeah, they were a bit, but you know, the market sometimes does look for rather more than it deserves, and I think this is very much a case in point. The company's held up well in North America. It's maintained its market share there, which is important, despite the recession and difficult trading conditions, and that's encouraging. And I suspect that, you know, generally long term, this is still a very good investment, which is what some people are inclined to forget sometimes.
And the rights issue from English China Clays, what are they raising the money for?
Well, basically they've got $350 million of redeemable preference shares, which they issued a few years ago, and I suspect that it's probably easier to buy it all back than to service it, which is basically what they're doing. It does seem a strange way of doing things. I've not heard of this one before myself.
Doesn't surprise me.
But they are taking advantage of a very, very strong share price. I mean, they were tipped as takeover targets themselves on numerous occasions, and I think someone did have a go at them a few years ago. But you know, it'd be interesting to see the share price of Steatley subsequent to this rights issue, because ECC were tipped a bid for Steatley. Clearly, as a result of this, they're not. So we'll watch that one later today, I think.
Mickey, thanks very much. And that's the business news. Now it's almost 8:30. You're watching the Channel 4 Daily. Coming up in the next half hour, Ermintrude and Dougal indulge in a spot of flamenco. The effervescent, ever-versatile Mark Stein on this week's TV. And the oldies are the greatest. Larry Holmes returns to the ring. That's all after the news summary with Dermot.
Good morning. America's Jewish lobby has accused the Bush administration of siding with the Palestinians after the U.S. Secretary of State gave the Israeli government a public ultimatum over settlements. James Baker told a House Committee on Foreign Aid that the Israelis could either have $10 billion in loan guarantees or settle occupied territories, but not both. The Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace talks in Washington has told the Israelis the settlements policy is illegal and will sabotage the peace process. The controversial Prevention of Terrorism Act has been renewed for another year after a Commons debate. Labour called for a committee to review the operation of the legislation, which gives special powers of detention, arrest and examination. The renewal comes as John Major prepares to hold his first talks with Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds since he took over from Charles Haughey. The two leaders will be discussing the growing violence in Northern Ireland and ways of breaking the political impasse. In the province, a new group is launching an initiative to encourage ordinary people to give their views on how their future should unfold.
We're not trying to compete with the politicians, but we're suggesting that those people might feed into the political process if they have a chance to voice their views on the big questions of the Constitution, also the other questions of social and economic justice here, and security forces and the way in which civil liberties are at stake.
6 people have been taken to hospital after a train was derailed in Essex. No one was seriously hurt. A train from Southend en route to London was in collision with another at Rayleigh. 3 coaches were derailed and the station is expected to be blocked for most of the day. Both drivers and a ticket inspector are amongst the injured. 2 days of celebration begin in Kuwait this morning to mark the country's National Day and the first anniversary tomorrow of liberation from Iraq. But festivities will only temporarily mask the sadness and anger at the hundreds who are still missing a year and a half after Saddam's invasion.
In Kuwait, they're rehearsing to mark Liberation Day when they'll fly the flags of the international coalition that forced the Iraqi army home. But amid all the preparations and the outward signs of normality is the abiding memory of Iraq's occupation. Many Kuwaitis were snatched during the invasion and they're still missing.
The national community has a moral duty to put more pressure on the Iraqi government to release these innocent people. Saddam should not bargain over their fate. These people are basically innocent.
And now there's a new storm on the horizon which may even lead to a future war. A UN border commission will soon report on its survey designed to clearly define the lands of Iraq and Kuwait, whose borders have been vague since the day they were conceived. The demarcation will probably push Kuwaiti territory as much as a kilometre into areas like Iraq's Rumaila oil field and the town of Qasr, needed to preserve Iraq's access to the shipping lanes of the Gulf and so of vital strategic importance.
Normally, their main port would be Basra, and the ships would come out through the Shatt al-Arab. But that is blocked as a result of the Iran-Iraq war. This is one of the kind of loose ends left over from that war, which has never been dealt with. Those ships should be raised and the waterway restored to full use. In that case, the importance of Qasr to Iraq would diminish, though it would certainly not cease entirely.
The demarcation of the border is sure to enrage Saddam Hussein, and though he may not be in any position to react immediately, the seeds of future conflict between the two countries seem certain to be planted.
The newly reformed economy of Russia may have begun to turn the corner following the reforms introduced by President Boris Yeltsin. An aide says inflation is subsiding and the supply of consumer goods is improving. But the commission in charge of food aid predicts Russia will need help until next autumn's harvest and beyond, and described the amount so far received as disappointing. Adapting to the economic turmoil is likely to dominate the daily lives of ordinary Russians for some time to come.
It's 2 o'clock on an Arctic morning, and the Russian fishing trawler Kirovsk docks at the port of Murmansk after more than 2 months at sea. The tired crew, eager to see their families, had left home when this was still the Soviet Union. They've returned to find themselves living in the Commonwealth of Independent States, and that's not the only change. My husband simply can't go into the shops. The prices would give him a heart attack. 200 miles inside the Arctic Circle, Murmansk is Russia's northernmost city and home to around 500,000 people. Recently, though, the economy has become as harsh as the climate. Even in the local fish store, the shoppers are stunned by the high prices. The shelves are full because very few can afford anything. I didn't buy anything, says this woman. I don't have that kind of money. But some are adapting. The city's hairdressers have taken over this salon and hired an economist to manage it. We're learning the business, she says. It may take the Russians another generation to really understand. The Kirov's captain is realistic about the changes. A Russian flag now flies over his ship. The old Soviet flag has become a souvenir. The crew is now stocking up for another 2 months at sea. These are uncertain times, even in places as far-flung as this, and many of them wonder how much their country will have changed by the time they come back.
And that's the news. After the break, we've got the Magic Roundabout.
When they come home cold, warm them up with hot Flybina, packed with the goodness of vitamin C.
I see you've chosen a liquid detergent and it isn't Daz.
Oh, let's try that one.
Well, try Daz liquid in this new refill pouch.
I don't know. Oh, it's really good. I'm really pleased with it. What I did notice was the whites. This belongs to Sam, who's got a passion for chocolate biscuits. He holds them in his hand for ages, and the chocolate dribbles all down the arms, all over the front, and it's come up lovely, really brilliant whites. So I'm really pleased with that.
So what are you going to choose now, your previous liquid or Daz?
I'll take the Daz.
Well, with the refill pouch, you're saving money too.
Oh, that's even better. Isn't it, Sam?
If you could get white so white and save money, would you swap?
Vileda Sunsplash is specially designed to be kind to today's easy-to-scratch surfaces. Yet it's incredibly absorbent and so strong that you can wash it again and again. Vileda Sunsplash, a brilliantly different kind of cloth.
One day I woke again rather late. Someone was raiding our breakfast plates. The crafty clock is in for a shock, 'cause no one gets away without Cocoa Pops. So no, as part of a nutritious breakfast, Kellogg's Cocoa Pops take the milk chocolatey sound. We'd rather have a bowl of Cocoa Pops.
Back. Now it's time to get out the castanets as the spirit of flamenco comes to the Magic Garden.
We're off on our sunny holiday, sang Brian. Hey, viva lasagna, we're going to our holidays in Spain. Hey, viva fandanga, España, por favor. Oh, you're so common, said Dougal. He's right, you know, said Zebedee. It's time we went a little continental. I like Spanish dancing, said Florence. Me too, said Zebedee. And off they went. I don't know, said Dougal. Sometimes that slob of a snail is an embarrassment. He gives us British a bad name. He'll be wanting to do a conga next, in fancy dress. Spain is a country, not a holiday camp. Ah, yes, the real Spain is about passion and romance and tight trousers which go up to your neck. I like Spanish dancing, said Florence. It's not about kiss-me-quick hats and doing the hokey-cokey, said Dougal. No, said Florence. Exactly, said Dougal. Yes, show me a plate of paella and... What's that racket? Sounds like singing, said Florence. Spanish singing. Sounds more like a strangulated cat to me, said Dougal. Oi, you! Shut up, will you? It's called flamenco, said Florence. Is it? Said Dougal. Shush, said Brian. This, calls for some fancy finger work, said Dylan. It's very dramatic, isn't it? Said Brian. Earplugs in Spain, said Dougal. Said Ermintrude. I can feel my passion rising. I've always wanted to be a senorita. Olé, said Dougal. Hola, said Ermintrude. Ooh, that was very dashing. Caramba, said Dougal. Oh, this makes me feel all wild and free, said Ermintrude. Sancho Panza, El Cid. Ready, said Ermintrude. Aha, Rioja, said Dougal. Oh, be my toreador, said Ermintrude. Has anybody got any castanets? Woo! Oh, it's a caravan in Blackpool next year for me, said Dougal.
And the Magic Roundabout is back tomorrow morning at the same time. You're watching the Channel 4 Daily. We're taking a break now, but coming up next, Box Office. Is Mark in two minds about this week's TV? And after his recent troubles, Chris Eubank talks about life's hard knocks.
The achievement, if anything, flapped. They mean nothing anymore to me.
It was a quiet day in Metropolis. Too quiet.
Citizens of Metropolis, I have stolen all the sounds of the city. If you ever want to hear them again, I want $10 billion!
I think we're needed. Better take some ammunition. The sound's great, follow me.
Snap, crackle, and pop!
Take this, sucker.
Oh no! My beautiful machine!
Eat Kellogg's Rice Krispies as part of this nutritious breakfast.
Well done, Snap Crackler.
Kellogg's Rice Krispies. Now that sounds like breakfast.
I like nice things. Don't ever give me trash, dear. Give me a soap that won't go in a flash, dear. This one I hope lasts longer than your cash, dear. Things have never been worse. Inside you'll miss this lather, but don't mope, dear. Somehow I know the kids and I will cope, dear. We'll hide a file inside this cake of soap, dear. Things have never been worse. At least there's one thing that I'm sure of, a luxury in our strife, imperial leather. Our only comfort in life.
Which lasts longer? The most popular concentrated liquid or aerial liquid? Take 2 streets. Give one street 1.5 litres of the most popular concentrated liquid.
Do one wash at the normal recommended dosage and pass it on.
Give the next street along 3 litres of aerial liquid, which only costs a little more.
Just one wash, then pass it on.
Fine.
Thank you.
By the time they'd reached number 10, they'd still be going strong. But after number 17, the concentrated liquid would have run out.
It's run out.
While aerial liquid would be able to carry on down the road to number 20. So, there you have it. Bottle for bottle, aerial liquid lasts longer than the most popular concentrated liquid.
Can this Lenore user really tell Lenore from this other conditioner? Catherine and Harriet are going to test her. Can she tell which conditioner is which simply by feeling the kind of softness they give? What she picked out so far, they're all blue. That's That's Lenore. Looks like the girls are trying to confuse her, though. But will they? Or can she still tell Lenore's rather special softness? Yes, she can. So no, they can't pull the wool over her eyes. Lenore, feel the softness. Feel the difference.
Boys and spots. Has she got problems? She needs Clearasil lotion. It cleanses pore deep to remove twice as much grease as cosmetic cleansers. Use it every day to help prevent spots. So much for her spots. Now she's got another problem. Spot the difference with Clearasil.
Welcome back. A quick reminder of this morning's headlines now. The US Secretary of State James Baker's ultimatum to Israel over settlement of the occupied territories has enraged Washington's powerful Jewish lobby. The Palestinians have warned Israel the settlement policy will sabotage the peace talks. Hopes are rising that this week's Downing Street summit between John Major and the Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds will make progress on Northern Ireland. And Japan's former Prime Minister Zenko Suzuki is testifying in Japan's parliament over bribery allegations. A former minister has admitted taking money for political favours. That's it now. Over to Joanna and Mark for Box Office.
Dermot, thank you. Good morning, it's Tuesday, which means that Mark Stein's with us, armed with bouquets and brickbats for the coming week's television. But first, Warren Beatty can't get enough of the bouquets these days. Not only has his latest movie, Bugsy, picked up 10 Oscar nominations and the Golden Globe Best Picture Award, but he's now being made a Commander of Arts and Letters by France's Culture Minister Jack Lang. The presentation will take place next Monday. Meanwhile, Lawrence Kasdan's Grand Canyon has won an award at the prestigious Berlin Film Festival. The Golden Bear has been given to this tale of triumph over crisis. One of Britain's most prestigious fringe theatres, which has staged Harold Pinter's most recent play and has attracted stars like Glenda Jackson, faces a brighter future this morning. Last year, the Almeida Theatre in North London was threatened with closure when it suffered grant losses and cuts. But now it's been awarded a 60% grant rise by the new London Arts Board. To television now, and the Independent Television Commission has given the all-clear for an American evangelist organisation to set up its own channel on satellite in Britain. The European Family Christian Network will launch in June with a 24-hour family-oriented service offering news, sport, finance and drama programmes with a Christian slant and live faith healing. In order to get the deal, the station has been required by the Commission to run a statement saying that miracles are not achieved by the preacher. Well, Mark, you've watched television in America. I've seen the preachers standing up and preaching, but is that all that it is? I mean, what other sorts of programs could we
Well, basically, you've got everything now. They just put Christian in front of it, and suddenly it's a format. And I love the way in radio now, you now have Christian country, Christian reggae, Christian rock. I mean, I think all that's incompatible. I like that P.J. O'Rourke line. He says, you go into a Christian record store. There isn't actually a record called I Found Jesus and Lost My Talent. But that's what it all boils down to.
But is it watchable?
It is, surprisingly. You know, they say miracles aren't achievable. They should see the ratings.
What about this week's telly in Britain?
Ah, yes. Well, lots of sinful rock and roll music around this week. Tonight on BBC One, the story of Anna Mae Bullock, born in a cotton-picking, no-hope Tennessee town called Nutbush. Anna Mae met Ike Turner, who made her change her name to Tina Turner, and the rest is history, or rather, the rest is her story. His story is less impressive. After songs like River Deep, Mountain High, Ike's latest number is E48678. Not, as you might think, an artificial additive from Butterscotch Instant Whip, but Ike's prison number in the San Luis Obispo jailhouse, from which vantage point he reminisces about his days with Tina.
Tina's sister, Arlene, she was going with my drummer, Gene Washington. And anyway, they used to, in St. Louis, we drew a lot of people. The club's always packed. And so she had this little girl. Why, you know, I didn't pay Tina that much attention. You know, there was other girls anyway. She kept asking me, could her sister sing a song with me? And I told her, yeah, okay, you know, but I never would call her, you know. So she reached up and she got the microphone, man, and started singing while I was playing. I said, yeah, that girl can sing, you know, it started it.
Ike Turner, who now has a criminal record. It's by Nana Muscuri. Behind the Iron Curtain, they had pop singers too, and on Friday, Arena investigates the incredible case of Comrade Rockstar. That's Dean Reed, a Colorado boy who went to Eastern Europe and became known as the Red Elvis and the Red Sinatra. Difficult to be both, I'd have thought. You have to choose between driving rockers like You Ain't Nothing But a Running Dog of Capitalism and breezy swingers like Commie Fly With Me. On the evidence, he wasn't much good at either, although his devoted fans included Yasser Arafat, the George Michael of the PLO, seen here listening ecstatically to Dean's rendition of Ghost Riders in the Sky. Sadly, Dean himself is now a ghost rider in the sky, found dead in a lake in East Berlin in 1986.
Dean Reed was probably one of the most widely photographed rock and roll singers that I have run across. We have ended up with thousands, literally thousands of photographs. This is one of the most unique things we have in the collection. Are plaster casts of both his upper teeth and his lower teeth, that if he was in a strange country and should somehow break a crown, he was able to take this to your local friendly dentist.
I love rock memorabilia. I've got Elvis Presley's appendix down here and also the results of Ike Turner's urine test. Also on Friday, Star Trek celebrates 25 years by boldly going back to where they've been before. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy relive their greatest adventures. Beam me back, Scotty.
Roddenberry created an unprecedented mix of culture and race working alongside each other in the future. Thankfully, the network saw something exciting and unique. As a result, NBC decided to go where no man has gone before and premiered their first historic episode on September 8th, 1966.
Set your phaser on one quarter. I'll leave mine on stun. Let's get him.
Got through a lot of polystyrene in that show, didn't they? Captain Kirk explains what a Klingon is along the way. A Klingon is, of course, a crimpling space sweater, so figure-hugging that towards the end of the series, Captain Kirk was beginning to look like the Lana Turner of the 24th century. From the ridiculous to the sublime, Inspector Morse is back tomorrow. This series, we're promised, will learn why Morse refuses to reveal his first name. All we know is that it starts with E, so who knows? Maybe it's E48678 Morse. Tonight's episode, though, sheds more light than before on the inspector's past as we meet his ex-fiancée, the love of his life. Soon her brother is matchmaking and asking them to lunch, or as he puts it, why don't I look out an extra pair of nose bags? Nose bags? Isn't that Inspector Horse?
I've lost a great deal here.
So have I. This is madness. Madness. My father-in-law killed himself. Everybody knows that.
We're at the inquest.
I was curious.
You have to help me.
Things may not have been as straightforward as they seemed. It's possible that Henry did not take his own life.
But will his personal feelings compromise his professional integrity? It's a strong start to what's apparently the penultimate series. Inspector Morse, tomorrow at 8 on ITV. Don't forget Tina Turner, the girl from Nutbush, BBC One, tonight at 10:50. And Friday night on BBC Two, Star Trek's 25th anniversary special at 7:10. Later at 9 o'clock, Arena. Joanna.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
That's all from us. Now time for sport with Simon.
Morning.
Over to you.
New Zealand's cricketers have followed up their surprise World Cup defeat of Australia with victory over Sri Lanka in Hamilton this morning. Man of the match, Ken Rutherford, top scored with 65, as New Zealanders made it home with 10 balls to spare. It was Rutherford's third half-century in 4 innings since being recalled to the team. H.D. Nelson has the details.
Yes, thanks very much, Simon. And today, a plucky Sri Lankan outfit, well, they just went down in a nip-and-tuck affair against the very well-credentialed New Zealand side. Meanwhile, after the weekend debacle in the Shaky Isles, there is a gathering of groundswell from ordinary working Australians for the return of rampaging Roy Slaven to the one-day lineup. Who, after all, Simon, can forget Roy's devastating 4 wickets for 6 runs off 9 overs in a one-day fixture in Barbados in 1986, where Roy bowled totally blind after being accidentally hit over the head by Desmond Haynes in the first over. The blow, of course, temporarily robbed Roy of sight. Then there was the staggering 8 wickets for 15 runs in Bombay in 1983. Slaven bowled that day with a strained shoulder, a cork thigh and the groin ripped completely off the bone and a dicky ticker. As a final parting gesture before leaving for home, Her Majesty the Queen addressed a huge rally for Roy's return to the side in Melbourne today. Her most telling words were, "Bring back the big buffhead," and "Roy is ready to rumble or I am not Queen of England." And suddenly the big woman was gone. Could Roy Slaven be the boot up the date that this hapless bunch of hopeless Australians need? Tomorrow and South Africa at the SCG will tell. Bye now.
That was the immortal H.G. Nelson. Other World Cup news, England batsman Alan Lamb has ruled himself out of England's second World Cup match against the West Indies in Melbourne. Lamb is nursing a calf injury. But the West Indies opener Brian Lara is expected to be fit for the game on Thursday. Lara retired hurt with a bruised foot during the West Indies' 10-wicket victory over Pakistan. Boxing, and as the world heavyweight division contemplates a future without Mike Tyson, news this morning that former champion Larry Holmes is set for another title shot at the age of 43. Holmes returned to the ring last year after a 3-year retirement. Seen here beating Art Card in September, he confirmed he was still a force to be reckoned with early this month, with a victory over the highly rated and previously undefeated Ray Mercer. Holmes is now expected to fight reigning world champion Evander Holyfield in Las Vegas on June the 5th, and has been offered $4 million for the bout. Holyfield's fee is rumoured to be nearly 3 times that amount, $11 million. Here, meanwhile, WBO super middleweight champion Chris Eubank announced yesterday that he'll defend his title against the Paraguayan Juan Carlos Jimenez in Manchester this April. But less than 6 months after the bout that left Michael Watson in a coma, Eubank is facing a police inquiry following a car accident which killed a construction worker. And he says that his boxing success is now of little significance.
All these achievements, sure they've been good, but because one man has lost his life and another has been maimed, there's no novelty for me. The achievements, if anything, flat. They mean nothing anymore to me. There was a price to pay, inevitably, in such a sport, be it irreparable damage, be it misfortune. This is the price I'm paying.
Chris Eubank really going through it. Moving on to soccer, Liverpool striker Ian Rush finds out later today whether he'll need a third operation this season on his injured knee. Rush has made just 2 first-team starts since November, broke down in training yesterday as Liverpool prepared for tomorrow's FA Cup 5th round replay against Ipswich. And tennis, John McEnroe and Andre Agassi have been left out of the International Federation's list of entrants for the Barcelona Olympics. Neither player was nominated by US tennis officials. And Steffi Graf will be an overwhelming favourite in the women's event. Monica Seles, Martina Navratilova and Gabriela Sabatini failed to qualify after missing last year's Federation Cup. That's it. Now the weather and travel with Greg.
Thanks, Simon. Take care on the roads. There's an awful lot of fog about. Patchy fog is affecting a wide area of southern England this morning, with some rather grey and misty conditions extending up across the Midlands. Visibility is very poor in places, especially in parts of Essex and Kent. In the north, showers are dying out in the far northwest, while there's a bit of rain across Northern Ireland and the borders. Scotland is going to be mostly cloudy today, with outbreaks of rain spreading northwards and a few showers at first in the Highlands and Islands. There's thick fog across the central region at the moment, and high winds with speed restrictions in force at the Forth Road Bridge. For Northern Ireland, there'll be some rain or drizzle too, and strong winds by the afternoon. Much of northern England will have a misty, dull start, but it should become brighter with some sunshine developing from the south. And Wales and the West Country will have a warmish day with plenty of brightness once the fog goes. The southeast can expect a dry day with sunny spells and temperatures on the mild side for late February. There have been numerous accidents on the A13 in Essex this morning, and a serious accident has blocked the A12 at Kelvedon with tailbacks to Marks Tay. By this evening there'll be just a little rain left in the far northwest of Scotland, with the rest of the country dry and having broken cloud. Tomorrow another band of rain will push across Scotland and into northwest England, with some drizzle turning up in the southwest as well. But it's going to be mainly dry and bright in the south and east of the country. Finally, as you may have heard in the news, a train has been derailed at Rayleigh in Essex. There's no service to or from Southend Victoria as a result of that, and passengers are being advised to use the Tilbury line instead. That's it for now. Coming up next, a roundup of today's news with signing for the deaf and hard of hearing.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock and you're watching the Channel 4 Daily. Between now and 9:15, as always, we'll be bringing you this morning's top news, sports and entertainment stories. First, the news. James Baker's ultimatum on settlement of the occupied territories provokes Israeli defiance. Hopes rise for this week's summit between the Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds and John Major. And average personal debt rises fivefold in 3 years in some parts of Britain. America's Jewish lobby has accused the Bush administration of siding with the Palestinians after the US Secretary of State gave the Israeli government a public ultimatum over settlements. James Baker told a House Committee on Foreign Aid that the Israelis could either have $10 billion in loan guarantees or settle occupied territories, but not both. The Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace talks in Washington has told the Israelis the settlements policy is illegal and will sabotage the peace process.
400,000 Jews have come to Israel from the former Soviet Union since 1989. Over 50% are still unemployed, many relying on soup kitchens and handouts for survival. Hundreds of thousands more Russian Jews are expected to come. If there are no loan guarantees, it could be a nightmare, though Israeli ministers still try to sound optimistic.
It's horrible, it's full of pain, it's disastrous, but you continue to live as a people and as a nation.
Many of the immigrants are housed in bleak caravan sites such as this one, Beit Hashmonai, just outside Tel Aviv. Among them are some of the most skilled members of Russian society, engineers, doctors and scientists. Few have found jobs matching their skills.
Strict treaty and its commitment to redistribute wealth, particularly to Spain, Portugal, Greece and Ireland. Member governments who signed up last Friday said Mr. Delors must now pay up. That means richer countries paying more. So Britain's reduced budget contributions and the special rebates won by Mrs. Thatcher at Fontainebleau 8 years ago are coming under new scrutiny. France and Germany question Britain's right to continuing special treatment.
Well, obviously the poorer states are going to win, and that means the richer ones are going to lose. I think